Hey everyone, so I just wanted to give you a quick look at the extra prompt that I'm giving you for the essay. I'm giving you a Bloodchild prompt. So I went through the passing options, the different prompts on passing on Friday. And basically we have sort of a historical one. How does passing represent the historical state of racial relations? And then we have a more formal one, analyze the narrative technique, the use of free and direct discourse, which we discussed on Friday, to sort of blur objective and subjective viewpoints. So very interesting close analysis to do in passing of the sort of blurring of voices. What seems objective is actually subjective. Then more of a aesthetic symbolism, use of color or abstract contrast, black and white, death and life, the way in which, imagination plays into life, how race represents sort of a sinkhole of fantasy illusions that in a way was, consumes the narrator as much as Claire in a way. She's so confused by the end and, unsure whether she wants her to die or is horrified by her death. And so I suggest here that there's a passing also suggests death in a way, passing away. So it's a kind of more abstract philosophical level of reading passing. And that kind of feeds into the prompt I'm giving you for Bloodchild. If passing is about shades of gray, then could you say that Bloodchild is about shades of red? You could. What are the categories of legal, political, social, family, personal species, and interspecies identity in Bloodchild? So, how does identity get negotiated? What does it mean to be human or not? To belong to these different species identities and interspecies identities in Bloodchild. But then also the politics of the preserve, the family dynamics, family politics, if you will. That this story is graphic in the events depicted, but the issue of unspoken family dynamics and grudges and is very familiar to all of us, most of us, and certainly a mainstay of of so in a way this is a really outrageous story, but in a way it's really familiar. But I want you to think about these kinds of how these explicit and implicit social relations are defined in Bloodchild. This prompt asks you, 1, to explain the relation among categories that are explicitly named in the story, including proper names. So Gone is the name of an individual. Individuals get names like Gone. To Click is the name of a species, but it's a proper name. So that sort of thing, how different levels of identity are encoded. Finally, I ask, Bloodchild ends more ambiguously than Passing's concluding catastrophe. it's actually not saying that much. That's quite a catastrophic ending, but arguably so is Bloodchild's. You might feel that way at the end. They're both, you know, gut-wrenching conclusions. But I think we all agree that, you know, family is hard and involves gut-wrenching trials at times in a normal life. That's part of a normal life. So I'm asking you here the question I think Butler asks: how sustainable is this? Should it be sustainable, or how do we evaluate its sustainability? Is it, you know, unambiguous catastrophe akin to the passing? Or is, how do we evaluate the gray zones, the red zones, if not? Okay? Yeah, shoot me questions, emails if you have questions. Thank you. So I thought it'd be good to go through some particular statements by various characters from the first part of the novel to help introduce some basic themes. And I think looking at these statements in isolation will make things clearer, because these different voices are can be very hard to follow. So Cora, neighbor, wife of Tull, it praises Addie's cooking and is judgmental and kind of evaluates different people, but she makes a statement here that really is a pervasive theme in the novel: the difference between town people and country people. Rich town ladies can change their mind, poor folks can't. That's really understated big themes that they're going to town and getting buried in town. This whole like town versus country dynamic is massive context, understated context for this. So it also understated is, although the weirdness of ants, although it is emphasized by Peabody, what an odd duck he is. But one thing it might be easy to overlook, but to think for a second what it might mean to live your whole life as a man in Mississippi without ever sweating. How do you get away with that in this context without being a total, I don't know, like some kind. It's Darrell here suggests he probably believes it. I suppose he believes it. But in order to get away with that, you must have kind of magically passive-aggressive way with people, or way of getting people to do work for you. So that's sort of what we see playing out here. This issue of privacy and not being beholden to anyone, that seems like part of Ance's shtick, or how he gets away with it. This supposed righteousness and not being beholden to anybody, but sort of being passively sort of leeching on them. And Darrell's voice. So the question of voice in general in this novel is very mysterious. So Darrell is the main narrator, the most eloquent and reflective, thoughtful. But that reflexiveness, self-consciousness, is correlated with his increasing insanity. So this is a book where our narrator is unreliable in a really profound way. So we're reading the perspective on a world that is itself excluded from the world. He ends up in an insane asylum. So it's interesting to compare this text in a way to like Sound Sense by Octavia Butler, the idea of language itself as being marginal. It's a marginal communication of a marginalized kind. And that these sort of existential musings of Darrell's are very poetic and profound and Hamletian, but they cause him to go insane. I guess that's another, question that Shakespeare as well poses is the difference between the sort of question of your cosmic purpose that Hamlet poses, like, what am I here for? This self-awareness, without a god, without a kind of mythology to explain it to you. That's the modern condition that Hamlet inaugurates in a way. The conflicting interests of the Protestants and the Catholics in Shakespeare's time is kind of echoed in that play. Hamlet obviously is the icon of a kind of crisis of conscience, and that's what Darrell. That seems to be the theme of a lot of Darrell's thoughts, and so that's a haunting aspect of this novel. That at the center of it is a consciousness that actually can't stand it, can't survive it. It's driving him crazy. It's this, primal, mythic kind of violent negotiation of family boundaries, just like in Bloodchild. How do you hold a family together? What holds a family together when you strip away totally all the politeness? What are the primal forces? Animal forces. They are likening the family to, my mother is a horse, my mother is a fish. That's how they're negotiating these family boundaries. The question of the legitimacy of Jewel, this kind of family boundary. Question of abortion and the dad's remarrying. We see this, on the one hand, animal, kind of savage, violent negotiation of bodies, who's inside and who's out. So again, like Bloodchild. But then on the other hand, in Faulkner, it's like this mythic, primal myth, the battle of the Titans, for a sort of symbolic primacy, to be hero of the story.